Hello, Map friends, and welcome to episode 2 of Worldbuilding and Chill. And today I'm very excited to be talking with Irish author Kate Callaghan, who I worked with recently on her revised edition of her debut novel, Crowned a Traitor. And it was such a delight to work with her. It was such an awesome project. And as you can see, I'm partway through reading the book now, and I have to say, it's really great. So today we're going to be talking about all things novels and world building. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. Hello. Thank you so much for coming to do an interview with me on World Building and Chill. I'm very excited to have you on to talk about this bad boy and all things world building and being an author, etc., etc. So could you start off by kind of telling us how you got into writing? Have you always been a writer, like deep down inside you? And then how that kind of led on to you creating this bad boy.
This bad boy. Yeah. So I'll start at the beginning. So my name is Kate Callaghan, which you know anyway. And like and like that, yeah, I write dark fantasy, which is fantasy just with a bit more violence. Not
Blood and
violence,
gore.
but it's blood and gore. It's a bit dark, but there's a few maybe some horror themes in there, or a bit of a bit more not so light and bright. It's a bit more sinister is the perfect word. Yeah. And yes, so that's what I do. And yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer, always. I don't even think it was something that was a question. I think when I was younger, I just always I fell in love with books, and I would rewrite, like I've said before, I would rewrite fairy tales into copybooks, which I wish I still had. And like that, I would change some details. Like I remember when I was really young, I think I was probably I was about 8 or 7 or 8 or so. I think I was like rewriting Cinderella, but like Cinderella was a vampire. So like there was always like a little
Cinderella should have been a
twist.
That would have made the story more interesting.
She only came out at night, so I bet you somebody's going to write that book now, because I've said it in about three interviews. So if Cinderella becomes a vampire at one point,
by me just jotting down nothing in particular.
No, but yeah, no, it was just natural for me to just create stories. I just didn't. It wasn't the fact that I was like, oh, I want to be a writer. I was never the best at grammar or spelling or anything like that. Like I wasn't like a straight A student. Like I wasn't like killing in the English department or anything. Like I was very average, but I always loved telling stories. Telling stories was my favorite.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's a difference between writing and storytelling. I think they go hand in hand, but they're two different mediums.
Yeah, definitely. That is exactly how I would put it. I think like storytelling in its origin was literally just people around a campfire telling stories about their past, about their ancestors, everything, and that's what it was. It was storytelling was very community based, and that's what I love about it. It's just sharing a story. You don't have to have 30 degrees to write a book, or you don't have to have any, or you can have 50. It just I think if you just have that urge to storytell, then that's what's important. But yeah, no, I always wanted to write. It wasn't even a thing. I was just always writing. It just evolved from there. Like I always, even when I went to school, I was always like, oh, I'll do this job so then I can write, and I'll do this job so then I can write. And it was never something that I was like, oh, I won't be doing that.
Yeah,
I was always gonna squish it in there somewhere. But well,
no, I guess that's great. That's like a true passion that it's the same way that people, the crazy people that find time to exercise all the time, that it just becomes a natural part of their day. It's without even a question. And obviously for you, writing is that thing that it's just part of your daily routine, like brushing your teeth.
Yeah, and I think if you don't, I think one of the biggest things is or the questions that I get a lot online is that like, well, like how did you get like the confidence to actually like write it and put it out there? And it's like, I think once you're okay with, you're never going to be the best, you're never going to be the worst. If you are just doing it for the love of storytelling, and that you just feel like you have a story that you want to write, then that's all that matters. If people hate it, then people are going to always love and hate what you do. So you just got to do it anyway, because there's going to be people there's gonna be your own little small team that are like, we love it. So you just have to, I think if you do things like from the heart and stuff like that, you just, as cheesy as that is,
he's here on the
things
Worldbuilding channel.
I know, if you do what you love, then it'll translate like that. And there's always ways to improve. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start kind of writing novels in kind of like more of a book form rather than just like stories that you'd reinterpreted?
So I was always, when would I say, I probably started the first book that I have that I still have on my computer was actually a dystopian book, and I probably started writing that when I was about 16 or 17. And it was just a bit of fun. It was just, I was obsessed. I loved like that, the Hunger Games. I loved dystopian things. I was like, oh, dark world, flip it on. It. Like, yeah, I loved everything dark. So I loved that idea of making our world so much darker. So yeah, I started writing that. But then like that, you'll go through manuscript after manuscript. But yeah, probably around then. And then I was just looking for, I would start a novel and then I'd stop and I'd start and I'd stop, because I just hadn't found that story yet. That one that I was like, I just love this. And but all writing is practice. And then I had an injury from work and I couldn't write. I like literally lost the feeling in this hand. Like it was bad. And but I wanted to write so bad. And then I actually started writing short stories. And again, I went back to my roots. Kind of, I took origin stories. So I took like Cinderella Stepmom's origin story, and I took Rapunzel, and I kind of made that modern, and I made little short stories. And then was going to do a series of 5 of those. I still might. And then Crowned a Traitor was the 3rd in that series. And then I wrote it all in a notebook, and it just took on a life of its own. I wrote it, I hand wrote it all. And then one day I was like, I filled one notebook, and then I filled another notebook, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to be a short story. This is a whole other world. It's going to be a long format. Yeah. And it was just one of the best things to write. It just and like that even that story manifested over time. Like it really came to life that way. But yeah, no, because I love all like that Crowned Trader is like has loads of different mythical creatures, and even some people that we'd know from from like that, which call it like this from which call it like that, different mythologies, different backgrounds, different everything. Like like I have some religious characters in there as well, or bibliography,
a bit of me.
Biblical. Biblical. Even some biblical creatures in there, or not creatures, I should say, but characters in there. Because I loved putting them together. But my characters, I like that, I will say, are very much their own characters. I don't take any real life or anyone's beliefs into it. I make them completely their own. They may have the same name, but they are completely of their own. And even like that, their backstories and all that are completely different. Like I've changed everything about them. But it just came from, I just wanted to take something, I just wanted to create a world that just had everything in it, like bring everything together. And that's how that was born. But like that, again, it was very unconscious thing to do. It literally started with me on the dart, and I was just looking around, and I was bored out of my mind, going somewhere I didn't want to go.
How all great things start, I think.
Yeah, and boredom. I just was like, boredom, absolutely. And I was looking around, and I was kind of like, those just like men in business suits. So I was kind of like, oh, they'd be like the warlocks, so going around and thinking they own the place. And then you'd have the ogres in the corner, and it's like, who were like based on kind of like workmen, that way, that are just so strong, and like that way they're just heading off. And yeah, it was just on like that, those like schoolgirls in the corner, that I was like, oh, they'd be the pixies, they're loud and they're obnoxious, and you just want to shh, quiet. It's too early for that much energy. But it was all just
down.
Yeah, it was all born from just me trying not to be so bored when I was on my way to somewhere I didn't really want to go. But I see everything very visually. So that's how it all came, and then it snowballed into what it is now. So it's a very strange journey to get there.
Yeah, but I think that's all journeys are strange in their own way, but that's kind of what
Yeah.
creates the love of whatever it is that you're creating. In your case,
Oh, absolutely.
your book, and kind of in my case, like a map or whatever. Have you
Mm.
ever kind of done any formal like writing training? Is it did you study at university or do any kind of extra courses or anything like that?
I didn't go to university, no, but I did. I just didn't. I didn't want to read, in a nutshell, but I just very much knew what I wanted to do, and I think university is great for people like that. If you've got a vocation or like that, you want to kind of find yourself, find what you want to do. I think it's great. But
Yeah.
I was so steadfast on what I wanted to do. I just wanted to work. I just wanted to write and take myself in there. But no, I'm always very much for self-research. I do a lot of research myself. A lot of all my characters had a lot of research put into them, and even like that, even writing itself. I did do a course. I did. There's a place in town called Big Smoke Writing Factory in Dublin, and like that, it was great. I did courses there, and like that. That's how I did like an online course first, and then which is like I think 6 weeks or something like that, and then it just kind of it gives you kind of building blocks to be like, this is where you're going right, this is where you're going wrong, and yeah, it just gives you a chance to like even get some feedback on your stories, and yeah, it was really good. And I interned with them for a while as well, and then it was actually one of the ladies there who told me that I should turn Credit Trader into a book, because she read the short story version of it, and she was like, turn that into a book. So I did, and
Okay, you don't need to tell me twice.
so I did. Yeah, I just, because I had that there was a magazine that I was going to give it to, and then I just was like, no, it needs to be more than a short story. So yeah, it was a long process, but anyway, yeah, so I'm very much like always doing my own work, so it's it doesn't all just come naturally. Writing never really does, but it or the writing stage does, but there's a lot of research that goes into everything I do, especially with self-publishing. So yeah, no, I definitely am always learning every day, trying to learn something new, because you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that courses obviously can provide some information, but if you don't then go out and try and be proactive in your own process, in the researching and the editing and stuff, that information is kind of useless, because you're not putting your own kind of blood, sweat and tears into the actual foundational basis of whatever it is that you're creating. So who/what would you say have kind of like influenced your style? Are there any favorite authors that you have? General sources of inspiration, like you've obviously mentioned the outside world, being like kind of looking out of your window thinking, he looks like an ogre or a warlock or whatever.
How offensive to the humans that I live around.
Ogres, like Shrek is an ogre, and I think he's incredibly cute. So
yeah, I definitely do have like a few favorite. I do have a few favorite authors, but like again, they would be very much different genres. Like sometimes I take things from different genres and mix them all together. Like when I was younger, Lord of the Rings was definitely like a huge inspiration for me. Like I was just mind blown that like you could just have. Yeah, I was like, because before then I'd only read like fairy tales, and I loved fairy tales, but you know, you get the happy endings, and you know, like if you're looking at the Disney version, or whether it's the gruesome endings, which was the Grimm's fairy tales, but which were a huge inspiration for me. But it was Lord of the Rings was definitely one of the biggest things, because it was just like, it was so in depth, the languages and the different creatures and the different areas and the different whole other world. Like yeah, no, it was definitely a big inspiration. It was definitely, I think now, I think was definitely the biggest inspiration for me when I first saw those films. I was only about 7. I was very young, but it definitely had a role to play. But it was definitely something that I like to this day, like, because I never, because before that I'd watched like Disney stuff because I was so young, but then I realized that like it could be so much like darker and almost scary, but not too scary. You could still enjoy it, and it was it's definitely a big influence for me. But like that again, the real world, even things that going on in the real world are a huge inspiration for me. I love putting them in, like I love just being inspired by things that are kind of going on and putting them in, whether it's like social issues or anything like that. Like they're very hidden. I like to do things very, very subtly like that, but I like to kind of put those in as well, to show that in some way kind of helps me understand them better, and just kind of shows that you can put things from the real world into a fantasy book, and it kind of, like that learning about right and wrong and all that stuff, you can turn into something more entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also by integrating real world elements into a story, it makes it more relatable, because obviously fairy tales are completely removed from our realities. They're in this different realm, or different creatures and stuff that we don't see in our everyday lives. So that kind of it kind of makes it more relatable, that you can kind of see, oh, that does make, I can feel something kind of from my real life when I'm reading about these characters who I wouldn't necessarily have anything really in common with. And that was something I've kind of liked about your book so far, like this just like little integration, like with the Walkman and stuff, with kind of the human world into the writing. It was kind of like, oh, that's really cute.
I really like little bits here and there. Because no, it's definitely like this the world that I built, like Malum and Kalos is like kind of one realm, and then the human world is another realm, and there's loads of different realms that I do want to kind of go into that you don't really see maybe in this world, in this book, but like that in the next book you see a bit more, in the next book you see a bit more. There's going to be probably like 2 other series and duologies and everything like that based on all these realms, because it's a bit like a cake. It's like my world is a bit like, that's a realm, that's a realm, that's a realm, that's a realm. They're all like layered on top of each other, so it all
tasty, and then like that cake.
A big tasty realm cake. And then they'll be like, because like that I was obsessed like that with the kind of Marvel universe and everything like that, and how you could have something so like that magical and fantastical, but then it's very much in the real world as well. So like that I love that idea of like multiverses and everything like that. So it's very it makes me so happy.
Well, that's the main thing, and that it makes you happy, because if you're not enjoying it, then what's the point?
I know that's the thing. I think with every book is like, you just have to enjoy it like that. When you're writing, writing can be so hard, because you just want, like for me especially, is that I always see things so visually, and I always want to do them so much justice. I want people to like be in it. So like that's because originally I wanted Crown of Trader to be a graphic novel, because I wanted the visuals to just be so strong, but maybe in the future I might but
you could do like an illustrated version.
Because I want people to see what I see in my head, or as much as humanly possible, without extracting my brain. But
that would be a bit painful.
It would be a bit intense, but I just want to do my world and my characters the justice they deserve. But but I think every writer feels that way, or author feels that way, or any person doing whatever they love, probably like that artists want, I'm sure you feel the same way. You used to probably see your maps and you're like, I want to get this exactly as I see it.
I've certainly, like at the beginning of a project, I have a very clear idea of what I want it to look like, and then kind of going on that journey, doing your best to do that head vision justice. It's definitely a process.
I know, but that's the thing. It's a process, and like that, the more you do things, the hopefully the better you get, and the better justice you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And could you give us like a little blurb of your book, so that people who haven't read it yet kind of, we're not going to do any spoilers in this interview.
Yeah, no spoilers.
I still haven't finished it, so I'm like maybe a third of the way through, and I'm really enjoying it so far. But for people who might be interested in reading it, just tell us a little bit about it.
So Clara, who is the main character, she is Lucifer's daughter, and she is sent at a young age to go live with the 3 queens of Malum, which is Abaddon, Lilith, and Eve, and they raise her to be the like heir to hell. They because like that, they each have their own strengths, and they kind of teach her everything that she knows like that, but they're very cruel and not very loving, and they definitely like that. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's a very different dynamic between the 3 queens, and then Clara is very much independent of herself. Like you don't even see really her being raised. It's more so about, she is raised, she's taken the tools that they've given her, rightly or wrongly, and then she is like, I'm done
making
my responsibilities to myself.
Yeah,
she's out of there, and and then she slowly learns, because she's been kind of trained and studious, and she hasn't been out in the world. And then when she starts going into Malum, then she learns that it's just so, there's so much politics and there's so much like that going wrong in the forest of Malum. And you know, she doesn't really, she's never witnessed it really for herself, and like that she goes on a journey then to, it's a journey for her own freedom, but in finding freedom she discovers that she might want other things for herself, and she meets a little motley crew along the way, because you have to have a motley crew and everything. And like that they teach her, and like that they're from different backgrounds as well within the forest, so they teach her like what's important to them, and what they expect of a ruler, not even her as a ruler. And yeah, it's her own struggle to kind of find herself. So it's very much like a coming of age, but still like at the end of the day, she's still very much true to herself, but she learns about responsibility and family and the secrets of her past, and all that went into her even being alive. So it's
her creation.
It's a big her creation. And you know, she learns about like why Kalos is which is the Fae realm, or the Fae side of the realm, and how Malum and Kalos interact. Yes. Better than my hand movement that way. And
well, yeah, I was going to talk about the map in a little while, but
yeah, I know it's very hard not to give any spoilers. I find it's really, because it's like there's so much in it that it's
yeah.
But yeah, if you like but roughly, if you like learning about somebody's journey and like that, a dark world in which it's set, then it'll be for you. And like that, Clara isn't, and I wanted it to be very much that she isn't the perfect, I'm now a ruler, I'm amazing, everyone thinks I'm amazing. She has a lot of self-doubt, a lot of and what you call it, she like she struggles a lot with learning what's right and what's wrong with how she was raised. And of course Lucifer's her father, so her sense of right and wrong can be completely warped. She can be selfish, very selfish, but it's not so much about her becoming like the most amazing person ever. It's just about her being the best person she can be for the creatures of the forest. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, I was actually going to ask you kind of how you went about creating a lead female character that wasn't kind of like, because my impression of Clara so far is that she doesn't really fit into any of the like major tropes that you get for female leads, which I find to be really interesting, because quite often there's these like called Mary Sue or whatever it is, where they're like, they can do everything like straight away, and they don't seem to have any flaws or anything like that. How did you go about creating like a well-rounded character, female character?
Yeah, so probably like that from reading is that I kind of found that, and I hate that trope of you know, not like other girls, because it's like
every other
because every girl is like every other girl in some way or another, you know, that way. But it's when you've been like pigeonholed into a stereotype of what a girl should be, that's where that whole, and then you get a lot of books where the kind of girls are kind of like, I'm amazing and I'm beautiful, or else they're described as kind of ugly but brilliant, and you're kind of like, no. You're like, no, you know, you don't need a scar to prove that a not beautiful girl can be beautiful or smart or intelligent, you know. But it's how I went about her was she just was very strong in my mind, that, and I wanted somebody who would have been the character that I wanted to read about, somebody who wants what she wants. She isn't immediately like thrown off course because a guy comes into her life, or that she's very much solid in who she is, but yet she's still willing to learn, and she struggles with her own, like almost like that mental struggle of like where she belongs and how she fits in. It wasn't so much about her being I didn't care about her being a strong female character, because I think all females are strong in their own way, and it's just about her being herself. It's you know, it's not about her being you know, the idea of strong or being the idea of weak. It's just a person going on their own journey like that, because like that it doesn't, because I'm very much like, people are people, and we're all, you know, I don't like the idea, I don't even really like the idea of like that whole like, this is what it is to be strong, or this is what it is to be this. You're just we're all just trying to find our way. And I wanted her, and she was and she was very much like that. Like, even like there's decisions that she makes that I don't even really agree with in this book, which is ridiculous. But but she is like, there's things that she does that I don't agree with, that I wouldn't have done. Like, I probably wouldn't have ran. I probably would have done my duty and done what I was told. But she wasn't going to do that for herself. She wanted her own life, rightly or wrongly. It's but I didn't want her. I didn't want her to be put in any kind of specific category. I just wanted her to be her. There wasn't really any, I didn't really do any research for, I didn't want that typical, like, she is strong, she falls in love, blah. I wanted it to be very much about her as a person, her finding her way, and just being individual to herself. And it was,
I think you did a really good job of it, or at least so far.
Thank you. I know it's a hard balance, because a lot of people, not even a lot of people, like, that's not even fair to say, but it's it can be hard to write something based on somebody's personal journey like that without a lot of romance, or without a lot of how do I say, not even like romance plays into it, but like, it's without making them almost perfect and strong and taking down everyone in their path. It's a very fine balance. But I forgot where I was even going with that. But no, I just wanted her to be, her, because like that, I don't think you need to be perfect or amazingly beautiful. I think everyone's fucking beautiful. Like, it doesn't matter. But
hell yeah,
it's just no, I know it's things that sound it's because like that, it's always, there's always, like that in books, there's always this major transformation, and where they go from the ugly duckling to the swan, and I'm like, she was this beautiful swan before, she's not duckling. But
but ducklings are cute in their own way, like.
But you see, the thing is as well is that everyone, that's what I was going to say, is that everyone loves a transformation in the book. I love a transformation, but everyone loves a romance. Come on, who are we? But we love those, like, human contact and all that stuff. It's hard to write something that's purely based on just one person's journey and hold people's interest, because people always want more. But like that, but I'm working on getting the balance right. Maybe like that, the next book will have a bit more romance and a bit more of her relationship development and everything.
It's quite common in YA, particularly, that especially with female lead characters, that they're on this trajectory of doing whatever they're doing, and then suddenly it's like, ooh, abs, ooh, bad boy, and then they just go off a cliff. Exactly. Goodbye, character development.
It's like, but and rightly, but like that, some people, but like that, I mean, I love to read those books, and they're all entertaining, but I very much didn't want that. People always ask me for more romance, and if I was going to write romance, I'd write romance, and maybe paranormal romance, but romance would be the focus of that story. Whereas with this is, I think, with young adult as well, we have such a great opportunity to show, like, personal development, personal growth. Like, we're seeing that a lot more in books now, where it's like just people growing for themselves and stuff like that. But I do but I want to see more of that, not just somebody get caught up in a relationship. I want to see somebody actually standing on their own and being okay with themselves without the validation of a partner.
Well, also, given that it's typically written for young adults, but I would say mostly for females. I would say the majority of the reader base is female, that we these younger girls and women are reading these female characters who are kind of in some ways role models and people that they can kind of relate to because of the age or whatever, the struggles that they're going through. And if they're constantly reading these tropes of female characters just kind of following the male lead, I think if that's all you ever kind of come into contact with in stories, I think it's kind of like the responsibilities of the authors to write something that's gonna really make them think about themselves, and not to just internalize that actually this is okay, like
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, because like that it's like I always just wanted characters to just be by themselves, just to just, we don't need the like a love triangle or anything like that. Like, it's sometimes you just want to read about a person's journey, or sometimes I do. It's just something that I wanted to put out there, and show that you don't need to be in a relationship to be fulfilled, to be happy, or anything like that. I mean people are great, partners are great, love and support, every human being needs it, but
Yeah.
it's but yeah, no, I would love to see more people just writing about. And I mean, you can still have, I mean, she has a bit of a relationship in there, but it does not define her in any which way or other. Like,
the cherry on top rather than the actual.
It's like he's there, and it's like he's around, but she's very much making decisions for herself, rather than like, oh well, will I get to see him and do all this stuff, and not, that way. It's very much her just kind of making decisions for herself, rather than based on a relationship. But yeah, me just being like, be single.
Well, not necessarily, but I think, yeah, it's nice, it's refreshing when you read about something that's character based, rather than like this relationship which is external to their personality.
And I think if I wrote other books and I felt like a relationship was tantamount to them growing, if they were discovering something about themselves, like maybe they didn't have a lot of love and affection, or maybe they were discovering their self-worth, realizing they are good enough and all that stuff, then yeah, I think a relationship fits into that story. But for this story, but for Crown Trader, it's so much about her coming from being raised by the three queens, three strong women, but three queens who have all had their own hardships, all have their own battles, all had their own struggles in life, and she sees them and they're alone as well, but like that she sees Eve, who like that loves Lucifer so much, like almost to her detriment. And it's very much, I very much wanted her to just be independent, and it's very much about her just discovering herself. Like at the stage of her life that she's in, like that she's so much responsibility on her shoulders, like so many things to consider, that it wouldn't make sense for me to have put in a major romance as well, because it would have detracted from the story, and it would have made the book like this thick if I'd had to put in full personal, because you have to put in like full personal development, then develop relationship development, plus the relationship, how that affects everyone else around them. So there's a lot more elements than just put in a bit more romance, the way you're sacrificing other elements of the story to put that stuff in. And maybe one day that'll be tantamount to the story, but for this it really wasn't. It was just about her. Just about her.
And could you tell us more, like, obviously you're talking about that you've got to plan in these different things, these elements to a story. How can you talk us through, like, kind of from the seed of an idea to actually this fully formed book, how you go about writing, brainstorming? Do you use like traditional, I mean, you've said about the notebooks that you wrote in that. Do you ever use any digital planning tools, stuff like that? Just break down our process.
So the process begins usually for me, it's a scene in my head. That's where the idea gets, is that I have the scene in my head. Like with Clara, it was the scene in the Beanstalk. She, it's her first job as a waiter. She goes in and it was her meeting.
First job
ever. My first job was in a kitchen, so I relate. But she goes in and she meets the owners, and she's seeing all these creatures that she hasn't seen for the first time, and she's kind of getting a sense of, and she has the power of revelation, so she feels things a lot stronger. She feels what other people are feeling, and she kind of gets a feel of what the forest actually is. And so that was really important, is that I wanted, that's how her power of revelation came about, was that when she goes in there, she feels a lot. I wanted to like put how she could feel the most she could feel, and that's where her gift came from. But anyway, so yeah, it starts off as a scene in my head. Like I saw the diner, and then I usually write that down, and then it all comes in bits and pieces then for me. Like I get one scene, and then I might get a scene 10 chapters later, and then it all comes in bits and pieces, a bit like watching a movie in the wrong order. And then it's
orienting.
Yeah, it's just, and then I kind of streamline it then and be like, right, well, that will go there and that will go there, and that makes sense of how she reaches that point. But I do pre-COVID, I went out a lot to write. I would go out to coffee shops, spend way too much time there, and
I can see the attraction of that.
overstay my welcome, because I find when I was in school as well, I would work better in loud. So if everyone around me is being really loud and like there's stuff going on, I find it easier to write. I can't write in complete silence. It like really overwhelms me. But I would literally take my notebook and I'd write out the scenes as they came, and then once all those scenes were out, I then would go to my computer and I'd write the full plot. Now I do, but back then I was chaotic as hell. But now I literally chaotic as hell. Lol, fun. But yeah, now I write the plot out. I write the subplots out. I make it as clear as possible. I have writing folders now, which are behind me, like tucked in there. And it has like, I write out, and I've created like sheets. They're actually on my website, but that I use because I created them, and then I was like, you know, other people can use them as well. But I like that it has the character name, their importance to the story, their relations, what their key scenes are, and I wrote everything out so that, because when I was writing Crown Trader, I mean, there was draft after draft after draft after draft, because I had to make sense of so many things, because I had no order. Whereas now everything's very methodical. And now that I've written the second book, where Traders Fall, it's made it so much easier. So like that now it's very streamlined. I try not to do any physical writing until I've got the plot, the subplot plot, and then I make sure that it all lines up. And then once I have all those done, and then I have character sheets as well, and world building sheets and everything. And then once I have all those done, then I will start writing. Or like that, sometimes I'll dip and dive between the two. Like I'll start writing and then I'll go to the world building sheets and be like, right, that's how that's going to work, and I have to make sure that works with the first book and all that stuff. But yeah, it's like organized chaos is how I like to frame it. It's like it's still a bit chaotic, because sometimes I just have to write out the scenes because I'll just forget them, or I have to. It's kind of like an impulse that I can't really control. Sometimes I just have to get it out. But yeah, and yeah, so now I obviously can't go out because of COVID, but yeah, now I write a lot more streamlined, because like that before as well, I would write before work, I'd write after work, I'd write on lunch breaks, I would scribble down anything I could whenever I could. Yeah. Whereas now I'm just one place writing as I go, so it's become much more streamlined.
Yeah. But do you prefer writing by hand or do you prefer typing?
First drafts, I prefer writing by hand, because I think it takes the pressure off so much. It makes, I think personally, I feel like I'm writing the story for me, for my enjoyment, rather than I'm writing a book for somebody else. Like when I'm writing on a computer, I'm very aware that it's going to be for someone else. Whereas when I write it in a notebook, it feels more like it's for me. Like that, Where Traders Fall, I was actually the second book, because like that I couldn't go out into bed, I was writing a lot of it on my phone, because I'm demented that way. And then
it's really difficult. I've struggled even sending like WhatsApp messages.
Yeah, I'm so used to it now, because like that I'd be like, even if I'm out and about, like if I had to go anywhere in the past, like I'd literally be like you know, the way you see people waiting for their coffee, I'd literally be typing about like Mila taking off somebody's head, you know, that way in the corner. So there's always everything I use is always important. Yeah, but yeah, I do look forward to the day when I can go back out and write, like especially when it's the summertime. I used to love going. My favorite days ever were going out and just being out and about and writing, and just because a lot of my scenes would come from other people as well. Like you hear, like, you know, if you're in somewhere, you hear somebody yelling at somebody else, and then you're kind of like, oh yeah, tension and building, or you know, or like that, you'll see different gestures, you know, like some people will be really like, and other people, you know, be very calm and be like, yeah. It all, I'm very much inspired by kind of what I see around me as well. So it's how the scenes kind of come to me, is when I see other things. But I mean, I've still literally haven't left the house in like a year, but I still wrote a whole second book. So the ideas are there. They just come in differently.
And can you tell us a bit more about how you do your world building, like how you go about creating stuff like politics, religion, etc., etc.?
So for this book, I wanted everything to be in it. I wanted, which is why I have like biblical creatures, or even some from like Greek mythology or anything like that. I wanted to kind of get a sense of everyone. I wanted this world to like that be like a world that we have like in our own world. We have so many cultures, so many religions, so many everything, and I wanted to put that in my book, but not in a use it for my gain way, but have it as this is the world that we live in, so this is the world that I'll create, because it wouldn't make sense. I wanted it to be like a world within our world, because there is still the human world, it's just in a different realm, but I wanted to kind of encompass bits and pieces of that into it without actually it being about that. It's just there. Same way in our world, like we don't understand every religion, we don't understand everyone's culture, but it's
world.
Yeah, but it's still around us, it's still influencing us, like it's still there, and that's kind of what I wanted to create in my own, like, the ogres might not understand the giants might not understand the vampires, but it's very, and like that they all have their own backgrounds and stories and everything like that, but I wouldn't even say that there's religion in my book. Like a lot of the creatures that I have in my book are they're the creatures that we learn about, the things that we study. They like, and even some of the characters like Abaddon and Eve, like they're built within a religion, but they are in my book, they're very much standing on their own. Like, who would they worship if they're already a god? What does a god, or what does somebody in a religion worship? It's very much autonomous to all that, but because I didn't want that to matter either in the story. I wanted it to be more based on morals than it is based on a religion leading anyone, because I think that just gets tricky then if you're putting in all it just gets very complicated very quickly. And again, I would never want to be disrespectful to anyone's religion in the outside world by putting it into my book and in a real way, because it wouldn't sit right with me. But because like that, everyone has their own opinions, everyone has their own views on everything, so I think I wanted something that everyone could enjoy rather than putting in all that stuff. But politics is my favorite thing to write, because politics in general make no sense.
Yes.
Politics isn't politics is an opinion, but yeah. So, but in my book, the politics are very much based on personal gain, and what people can get from other people, how people profit from other people, keeping the low, keeping the high. That is how my politics kind of work. And you see kind of Clara kind of come to realize that in her own way. But again, in my book, like even if you are from the ogre swamps and you got nothing behind you can still do whatever you want. You can still rise up against, and you can take over the bloody forest if you want. But it's all very, but the politics in my world would be very much about a lot of plots, a lot of schemes, a lot of who can get what from what. But because I think that's true in real life as well.
Absolutely.
You've people who are trying to make change, and then you've people who are trying to keep the system the way it is, and I wanted to put a bit of that in my book, or a lot of that in my book. And the second book, Where Traitors Fall, has a lot more politics in it, a lot more schemes, you see a lot more how the dynamics work. Even when people know that something's the right thing, they don't do it because they have interests of their own that they don't want to risk. They have lives of their own they don't want to risk. Yeah, so but yeah, I love writing. Maybe not so much, maybe politics is the wrong word, but I love writing schemes and plots and who's getting what from what. And
I suppose that goes hand in hand with more like dark fantasy, sort of like pink glossy, just like Cinderella fantasy.
yeah, you see it a lot more in like Game of Thrones would be a perfect example of that. Like it's all schemes, it's all it's all politics, it's everything. I mean, you've a few battles thrown in there, but that is fantasy, but it's pure politics. Like it's all who's gaining what, who's doing that, and that's what I love. I love being like, oh, they do that there, and then that has an effect there. I love all that. Yeah. So the second book definitely is a lot more like that, and then the third book is then how those decisions from the second book have such a huge effect then on the third book, and the characters that we see even from the first book you see change so much from everything that's happened in the second and then the third. Like it's a huge evolution for everyone. But yeah, it's exciting. But I know it's
that's great.
It's not the first book is such an adventure. Like it's just adventure after adventure. But then the second book is like there's still adventure. There's still some great action scenes, but there's a whole reason behind the politics and discoveries as well. But it's a lot more about how can she achieve this goal without action. It's about how she's going to get where she needs to get without actually doing anything, and she has to learn that she can't just run in guns blazing like in the first one she just does, and in the second book she can't do that. She has to actually
think about it
and then she struggles with and then of course she struggles with that and goes against that and everything like that, but because that's not what she's used to. But yeah, it's all a growth, it's all learning. She's still learning, so yeah, but she's young so she has time.
Yeah, she's got much to learn.
She does, so much to learn. God love her.
And can you tell us, like, obviously now this is the revised edition of your book.
It is.
And you are a self-published author. Can you tell us a bit more about self-publishing, how you made the decision to kind of publish the book is an actual book form, and then also a bit about the actual revised part of it, kind of with the lovely cover and the map. All these really cool thorns and stuff like that.
I think when I finished the book, I definitely was like, I knew about self-publishing and I knew about traditional publishing, and I did a lot of research. What I would say to anyone who's making that decision: research until you're so sick of it you don't even want to do it anymore, because there's so much to learn. There's so much inner politics to publishing. Like it's so much more than I think a lot of like with readers is that there's so much. Even for me, like every day I learn something new about the publishing industry. Like readers, I think, are seeing so much more of it now because of what's being published, but there's so much of a network behind it. And when I first started, I'd already published 2 short stories because I just wanted them out in the world, like that. They're currently being revised though into full-length novels, so very excited about those. But so I published them on Amazon KDP because that was the first thing I looked at, and I put very little thought into it. I did very little research into it, honestly, and I just put them up, see how they do, right? And it kind of ticked along, and I was like, oh, this is, and I could do and I didn't even have social media at this point. I just was like, okay, that kind of felt nice to just have control over it. And then when I was writing Crown to Trader, then I kept going back to it because I would look at, like, because if you want to be traditionally published, you have to get an agent first, and getting an agent can take anywhere between 3 to 5 years, if not longer. Then getting actually published could take 5 to 10 years. It just, I wanted to be writing and getting my stories out there. I didn't really care about get the big advance or have one series and I didn't like the idea. And then the more I kind of looked into it, I didn't like the idea of, like, giving up a lot of creative rights or anything like that. Like I just and I mean, there's great elements to traditional publishing. I mean, they give you, you've got editors that you don't pay for anything. You've got editors, you've got cover designers, you've got map makers, you have your team when you sign that contract. When you're self-published, it's not easy. You have to find your cartographers, you have to find your editor, you have to find your formatter, proofreaders. Everything is based on what you do yourself. And they're very, very different paths. But I I went down self-publishing because it was always going to be in my control. I was going to decide the cover. I was going to decide everything about it. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things opening up now. Like there's hybrid publishing where it's somewhat traditional, somewhat self-publishing. You have a bit more control, and they do some things, but like that. But there's so many different avenues opening. Publishing is always evolving, so I would never say never to anything, but I'm very much
already self-published, and you can show that you've got a good track record or whatever, that you've got this social media presence or whatever it is that you've been building, that would open perhaps more doors to a traditional published avenue if you wanted to go down there. But I also see the point that it's the same for me as an artist, like having control of and ownership of your work, or at least controlling where it goes to and who's kind of got a hold of it, is really important in this day and age where people will have a say over everything. So going down the self-published route, obviously you have control over everything, which obviously has its pros and cons.
Definitely.
But I can definitely see the allure. And also that you're not on somebody else's schedule, that you are proactively promoting and writing your worlds.
Like it's a lot more, again, like that. It's a bit like being self-employed with anything. It's going to be a lot of work. You're gonna have, you're writing book. I mean, because especially when you publish a book, in my naivety, I didn't realize that like that. Once you publish, people do want the next book, whether you have a little readership or a big readership. People want the next book, and then you're promoting the first one, and then you're writing the second one, and then you got to be writing the third one. And I mean, it's amazing. I love it. I love being self-published because I do everything. I get to create everything. I get to see the excitement with everything. I decide everything. I decide if I want to release a book every year, every 2 years, every 5 years. It's very much all down to me. Nobody has a say over what I do, which would be very hard to give up. But it would be, but I don't know. You see, I can't speak for my future self or anything like that. But I love what I do regardless, and I would always have a very active role in no matter what I did in the future. I would never settle for anything less. But if somebody was thinking about self-publishing, like again, I'm sure like with the art, like it's a big step. There's a lot more work in it than you think, and so and it might not, if like that you aren't interested in the business side of it, you aren't interested in marketing, then you might be better off with a traditional publisher, because so much admin comes into it once you start publishing. Like there's so much admin that you don't even realize that you have to do, and there's so many things that you have to add on and everything like that. But I love it though. It's great, and it's forever evolving. I mean, people are so open now, and it just like that and there is a stigma with being self-published as well, because some people are like, oh, they're self-published, did they really deserve to be published that way? Like nobody picked their book to be published and all that stuff. But I think now things are changing. I think once you show that you that's why it was really important to me to do a revised edition, because I was so excited when I did the first edition to like get it out there and to get the story in people's hands, that I didn't know, because there's so much to learn, so much everyday learning, that I didn't really think about all the elements. So like that I decided early on, like I think it was only out like a month and a half before I then was like, you know what, I was going to get an editor. So I got like a professional editor, and I got like that your beautiful face to do the map, because I wanted the map. I figured that if I was going to do a series and spin-offs and create this whole world, then I wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. So like that I got like, and then I got a formatter to put in all the lovely thorns and the crowns and the chapters, and I just invested so much into it, because you have to invest so much into it. Like I kind of, now when I look at things, I'm kind of like, if I was traditionally published, what would I expect my book to be? And now that's kind of what I try and reflect in that's what I strive for now. I'm like, what do traditional publishers do? And then I try and
for yourself.
And try and do it for myself in my own way, and try and do it that way, so that way you are more credible, and people kind of trust in you. And I think if people see that like you're investing a lot into it, and that you're always trying to improve yourself, like, which I always am, like if somebody says something about my book, like I always like, I'm like, okay, maybe I should think about that, maybe I should change that, you know. I think you always have to be listening and learning and like that. I love when readers tell me those things, like if they're like, oh, maybe you should change that or do that, or you know, I took a lot on board with the first edition, that people were like, maybe you should change that element, and I was like, oh yeah, do you know what, yeah, you're right, actually I want to change that, and little bits changed, and now I love it. Now it's like my little baby. But yeah, no, it's great. Now you need a team. Yeah, you need a team as well, like that. If you're traditionally published, you have a team. If you're self-published, you need that team as well for your own time. I mean it can take, editing a book alone takes so much time, you know, and if you have somebody who can help you with that, then that makes a huge, like, because they spot, like my editor Emma, she is amazing, she spots things that I wouldn't think about,
like
that I wouldn't spot.
eyes on,
yeah, you need eyes.
perspective.
Yeah, and it's and when you have a little team, it makes you, it just, it kind of gives you your own little kind of world as well, that you're like, you're not doing it alone, and that there's people that are like helping you, and then they're excited when they see it done, and then you get to share a bit of their work, you know, that way. Like I get like I love your map in it now, like it's perfect, like I couldn't imagine anything better. And it's great when you get to work with other freelancers then, because you're giving them a space, you know, as well. So it's like everyone coming together. It's really nice. I like it. Kind of, when you work with freelancers, it makes you feel like, yeah, it's a team effort, especially, yeah, and especially again, like when people do things for themselves, you know, they have their own struggles, they understand what it's like, you know, the promotion and the time and everything like that. So it's great to promote other people's work then as well. So it helps them, it helps you. Big team.
It's all big happy family.
Big happy family. Yeah.
Well, we're kind of coming towards the end of the interview, but my last question for you is, who is your favorite fictional character that's not from your book, obviously? Or maybe like a favorite book series. You can have one of each.
Oh, that is such a mean question.
I
know. So I'm actually gonna be super cheesy. So my favorite fictional character is actually from when I was younger, and it actually is Cinderella. And because I think she gets so much stick for being like, she just got married, but you know, she married the prince happily ever after. But she, I think, is very empowering, because she could have accepted what the stepmother said to her. She could have accepted that she wouldn't go to the ball, that she could have stayed home, that she didn't have to, you know, go. And it took a lot of bravery to go somewhere where you're not wanted, and you know, and she didn't have to fight for what she wanted, and she did, and she went, and she got the ending that she deserved, that she was happy, and you know, and that's, I think she gets a lot of stick and as being like anti-feminist or anything like that, but I think no, she made the decision to do what she wanted to do. So she's always been, I don't know, she was always very important to me growing up. So I think she'd be my favorite, you know, whether she gets the prince at the end or not. She got away from the family that were treating her so horribly, and she got to, not that my family treat me horribly, I love my family, but she made a new life for herself, which she deserved. So I resonate with her. Yeah, so she'd be my favorite.
And you had
character, yeah.
Woodland Creatures, which is my dream. It's my personal dream.
Yeah, she speaks to woodland creatures. Yeah, she's speaking to animals. Like who wouldn't want that? Yeah, I mean, literally, like Gus Gus is on my phone.
Oh, that's really cute. I love that.
No, little Gus Gus. But yeah, because I think there's elements to every creature. Like I know that the Disney princess got a whole lot of stick, but I think there's something to everyone's story. Yeah, that would definitely be my favorite, as cheesy as it is. But
we love cheese here on Worldbuilding, so it's all good.
Oh, we love some cheese. I mean, where would we be without cheese?
Somewhere deep, dark, and horrible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, that'd be my favorite.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on to speak to me. It's been lovely to speak.
It was great.
And I'm sure that people get lots of really juicy information from what you've had to say about your writing process. And
I hope so. I love to ramble.
Me too. Well, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I'll speak to you again soon.